I'm sorry. There is no more place for
storage.
Yeah, storage. So I have to read quickly. So do you understand? All right then. The table in the middle of the floor was big as a house, and the chairs around it was high as trees. Mr. Greedy felt very small. Then he sniffed. Coming from somewhere upon that gigantic table was the most delicious foody smell that Mr. Greedy had ever smelled. Mr. Greedy sniffed again. Then he decided that he must get up on that table. So he began to climb up the leg of that enormous chair. But it was very difficult to take. It was very difficult, and it took him a long time. But eventually, Mr. Greedy stood on the table. Everything was larger than life. The salt and pepper pots were both big as a pillar boxes. There were bowls of fruit on the table, and Mr. Greedy tried to lift one of the oranges. Mr. Greedy, being Mr. Greedy, took out of one of the apples there. Then he looked around. Over on the other side of the table stood the source of that delicious smell. A huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate and on the plate, huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal sausages the size of pillows, and huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal potatoes the size of peach balls, and a huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal peas the size of cabbages. Mr. Greedy hurried across the table towards the plate, and, being Mr. Greedy, began to eat. Suddenly, a shadow fell across the plate, and Mr. Greedy found himself being picked up by a giant hand and looking in the eyes of a real-life giant. "And who," thundered the giant, "are you?" Mr. Greedy was so frightened that he could only just manage to squeak his name. "Mr. Greedy," he squeaked. The giant laughed a laugh as loud as a thunder. "Ha ha ha! Greedy by name and greedy by nature," he bellowed. "Well, I think, Mr. Greedy, that you need to be taught a lesson." And what a lesson it was. The giant made Mr. Greedy eat up everything on that huge, enormous, gigantic, colossal plate. When he had finished, Mr. Greedy felt ill indeed, as if he would burst at any minute. "Now," said the giant in a much quieter voice, "do you promise to never be greedy again?" "Oh, yes, I promise." "Very well," said the giant. "Then I'll let you go." Mr. Greedy climbed down the table and went out through the door, feeling fat and extremely miserable. And do you know, from that day to this, Mr. Greedy had kept his promise. And do you know something else as well? Mr. Greedy doesn't look like he used to look anymore. Now he looks like this. This has a big difference. He now looks like this, which I think suits him a lot better, don't you? So, if you know anybody who's greedy as Mr. Greedy used to be, you know what to tell them, don't you? Beware of giants.
The end.
I am a giant!